Let's hit it.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori LeBay, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
Here we go. What you think about, you will bring about the mental change. We will.
Well, hello and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm so glad that you are with us today. I'm Lori LeBay, your host. And for those of you that are new, Alzheimer Speaks is about sound information, not just sound bites. We want to talk with people that are in the trenches, dealing with things from living and caring for somebody, a person with dementia, researchers, people providing services, products, and tools, a little bit of everything. So maybe you can be one of our guests. Now, if you enjoyed our opening music, it's called Clarion Call by the Mark Arneson Band, and you can download that on any of your favorite music platforms. Today, we're going to be talking with an author that's written a very interesting book. But before I introduce her, I want to give some shout outs. One is to dementiamap.com. You can go there for all kinds of resources and find out about events as well. That's dementiamap.com. There's also the Memory Cafe directory, which is really exciting because the memory cafes are now starting to open back up. And you'll be able to find those that are meeting in person as well as those still continuing online. I'm still doing mine in Minnesota online, but anybody around the world is open to join us. We do that on the second and the fourth Wednesday of each month from 1 to about 2:30 in the afternoon Central Time. I also want to give a shout out to Lorenzo's House. We just did a show on them the other day, but they are doing a youth camp, and that is going to happen on June 21st. So you're going to want to find out more about that. Just go to lorenzoshouse.org and you can go to their events section to learn more, but it'll be a really fun thing for, I believe it's middle school to college age children. Also on June 23rd, I will be doing a presentation actually on Dementia Map, which will be virtual. And you can find out more information on that. Just go to alzheimerspeaks.com on our main page. And then one last reminder is Maud's Ventures is giving seed money, $50,000 to $100,000 for 3 different challenges. So check out Maud's Ventures and learn more there. So it's time to introduce you to our guest. I am thrilled to have with us Caroline Boxall, and she is a mother of 5, a primary school teacher, a tutor, and an author. And her connection to dementia was through her mother-in-law who lived in a care home. And that was her inspiration to write a middle grade children's book, which is full of twists and turns. It's incredible. She's going to share more about her book with us. She's living over in the UK, and she really wanted to help raise awareness of different types of dementias and how that shows up and how we deal with it. And I'm glad to bring her over to America to share, as well as all the other countries, as we do have a global platform. Well, Caroline, I'm so excited to have you with us today. In the intro, I mentioned that your mother-in-law had dementia, but can you give us a little more detail, a little more background, just as to how that affected you and your family?
Yeah, so we're a big family. I've got 5 children. And my mother-in-law, about 10 years ago, we noticed that she started forgetting things and repeating things and just not being quite herself. After my father-in-law died, we saw quite a lot of her because she lived quite near us. And she would come for tea every Sunday afternoon. And my husband would go and fetch her and bring her back, and she would always try and make us a cake or a flan or something nice to eat. And I think we realized that something was wrong when she brought her cake and she proudly opened the tin, and there'd been no egg in the tin, so in the cake mixture. So of course it was just like a flat pancake, and we all dutifully sat there and ate it and said, "Oh, Grandma, it's fantastic, thank you so much." And she said, "Oh, I think I must have. I think I left out the sugar," and we realised that maybe something wasn't quite right, and it just got a little bit worse really slowly, because she was already well into her 80s when this started, and we were lucky, I suppose, that it was quite a slow progress. But then she started saying really strange things, and for us as a family to cope with that, we tried not to get sad. We tried to see the funny side of it. And so when she said things, we didn't laugh at her, we tried to laugh with her, because she had a really good sense of humor. And so when she said something funny, we would say, "Oh, Grandma, that's fantastic, I love the way you said that." And she would then almost play on it. It was almost as if she knew, and so she would carry on the conversation. And we have there's a family, and she died about 3 years ago, but we always call a Kiwi K-I, Gabrielle I, because and that every time anyone mentions the word Kiwi, we always have a bit of a laugh, and we remember Grandma, because one day she made a flan and she said, "I put kiwis in this flan," and we said, "Oh, kiwis," because it was obviously peaches. And she said, "Yeah, kiwis, K-I, Gabrielle I," and so we always call it K-I, Gabrielle I from then on. And little things like that she said, which were, you could take them as being breaking and really, really sad and negative. But we tried to make it fun, and afterwards, and my children, there are 16 years between the eldest and the youngest. And the youngest, Charlie, he was only 2 when all this started. And so we would say, "Oh, do you remember when Grandma said this, that, and the other?" And at the end of, we'd all take it in turns to have a chat with her. And at the end, we'd compare notes, and we'd have a smile and a laugh about what she'd said. Not in an unkind way in any way at all, just because we were trying to enjoy her as she was, because she wasn't the same grandma that she had been previously. So we tried to make the most of it. And then it came to a time when we had to get a carer. She'd had a very bad experience with her mother, who'd had to go into a home in Switzerland. She was Swiss, and her mother-in-law was in a very severe home, and my mother-in-law didn't know really what was going on, and as she was in England, it was quite difficult to keep track. So she always said to my husband, "Please don't ever put me in a home." And I think that's the same with a lot of people as they're getting older. They don't want to be put in a home. And she said, "I really want to stay in my house. Please don't put me in a home." So that was really difficult. And we had a carer who lived in with her for a while, but it was uncanny. Every time we went anywhere, we wouldn't go far away, but anytime we went anywhere, we'd get a call. She'd either fallen or something had happened, and we'd have to come back. And in the end, the one carer couldn't cope, and 2 carers couldn't cope, and so the time. In fact, she ended up in hospital, and the hospital said she needs to go into a home. So that's why we then had to move her. And in fact, the first home we moved her into was quite nice. It was near us, but then a space came up at a really, really nice home that was very close to us. And so she spent about a couple of years in there. And it was while she was in there, and in fact, all the time leading up to that, her time in hospital, her time in the first home, the time in the second home, we met some fantastic people. She was on the dementia floor, but the people we met, and the different types of dementia that we came across, because we visited quite a lot. And that was when I thought, these are really interesting characters. And my perception of dementia was never, it was just a sad thought that that somebody was not able to remember things. That was pretty much all I knew about it. But seeing all these different people and the different levels of dementia, and some really young people as well, which was sad, really, really sad. People who had been doctors and business people and reduced in their capacities, but still very much people to be, to talk to, and they were great fun to talk to as well. And a bit like on our Sunday afternoon tea parties, we would come back home and we'd say, oh, I spoke to Brian and he said this, and I spoke to, and it made our visits to Grandma so much more fun, because we were looking for interesting and exciting and funny things that people said. And I think that's the only way we could deal with it, to see the funny side of it, and to make it into, not it's harsh to say entertainment, but make it into a fun visit for all of us. And my son, who was about 5 by then, he hadn't known Grandma when not really, before the Alzheimer's struck. And so he would speak to her just as if there was, that's Grandma, that's how she is, there's nothing sad, that's Grandma, she doesn't remember things, I have to speak really, really loudly. And he would do that to all the people in the home. And the things that the people said back to him, because he was so little, it was just fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant. And he started playing the piano when he was about 7, just because they had a piano in this home, and he wanted to be able to play Christmas carols for them. And so he learned to play In the Bleak Midwinter, and that was his only carol, but he played it every time he went in, and they would clap, and then he played again. And it was fantastic. We just loved it, and he loved going in, and he would stand up and he'd take a bow, and it was, I mean, anywhere else it would have looked really precocious, but because of where we were, it just didn't matter at all, and he had no inhibitions at all. And that's when I thought to myself, these characters should be in a book. What would happen if a child found himself living on the dementia floor of a care home? And I thought, there's no way a child could ever live on the dementia floor of a care home. And so I had to think up a reason why he had to be there. And that's how I got the idea for my story. That is the basis of it. And I used a lot of the characters from the various places, the hospitals and the care homes. A lot of them are in the book, obviously with different names, and tweaked quite a lot. But I knew it was real. I knew these things could be said, because they actually had been said. They had been done, and so it was fun writing it. And it was fun remembering my mother-in-law and how she was when she was in the home.
Well, I love when you're talking about your son, because my daughter only knew her grandma with dementia too. And there was no difference, a total acceptance. Let's just play. No judging. Everybody's a little different, and I just think children are brilliant and can teach us adults so much. So I'm glad that you kind of saw the light between them and wrote this book to highlight this. And when you talk about characters, some people might say, well, they're people, not characters. And it's like, we all have characters. We're all characters in this big thing. So I know that that's not meant offensively by any stretch at all, but it is their personalities or their characters that just bring everything to life. When you were talking about that, it brought me back to visiting my mom and the different people and their personality styles, and from the grumpy old person that didn't socialize and just wanted to put everybody down, to there was one woman, and she was like 100 years old, and she watched over my mom, and she would come up, and every time she'd come and sit by me, and she'd hold my hand, and she'd go, your mom's having a hard time sometimes, but don't worry, honey, because I'm here for her, and it was just like, oh, melt my heart. I mean, just this huge, huge variety. And then you have the repeaters and, the agitators. And there's just so many different things that come out. But how you can deal with each of those mannerisms and the stories they tell are just incredible.
So in the book, we have a war veteran, and he has PTSD. And he helps Billy, who's the protagonist, he helps Billy with the history project and tells him all about his experiences in the war. And then we have Beryl, who I've just written it down here to remind me of which. Yeah, so Beryl sounds very much like your 100-year-old lady. Beryl had frontotemporal dementia, and she was very much the I don't like the look of you today. I don't really want don't want to talk to you today, and just so blunt, and that's how she was. It was fine. You just accepted that, and you thought, oh well, I better go home and brush my hair or something. And then we had Mary, who has vascular dementia, and then she has a stroke as well. And she was actually based on 3 characters that I merged together, 2 of whom were actually called Mary, but there are plenty of Marys in England, so I don't think anyone will realise who they are. But it was very easy to get the characters right in the home because they were there. They were real people, and they said those real things.
I love when you said the war vet and he helped with the school project. I mean, it just like melts my heart. I just think sometimes, and actually a lot of times, people overlook what they can give and contribute to our lives because we've just been told they can't. They can't participate, they can't give, they can't understand, they can't do. And to give them value again, to be able to participate. And then you just see that pride and they start sitting up straighter and the smiles that come on their face. And it just changes, in my opinion, the whole atmosphere in the room, when you give somebody purpose. And that kind of ripples off. There's that deep connection when people are talking, passionately and really truly engaged, not just, what's the weather type thing, but really having meaningful conversations. And not that we know if the details are always right, but when you're engaged, it really doesn't make any difference because you're really listening.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we found. It was difficult to begin with, especially for my husband, I think, when she was saying things that really hadn't happened or didn't happen, or they'd happened to somebody else and she was saying it happened to her. And he was trying to say no that and trying to remind her what actually happened. And then it didn't take long before we got to grips with the fact that it didn't really matter what the conversation was. It didn't matter if she got it right or if she got it wrong. You could have a really good conversation. And I had a really good conversation with her once about whether she ought to have another baby. And it stays with me because it was a really special conversation. She said, Caroline, I'm really thinking about having another baby. And I said, I think that would be fantastic. We'd love that if you had another baby. And we had such a good conversation. And we have loads like that, but that was one in particular that I remember. A lot of people thought that their parents would come and visit them. These were 80, 90-year-olds who still thought their parents were alive, and they couldn't understand why they hadn't come to visit them. And that was quite tricky.
My mom would ask every once in a while, not a whole lot, but as the disease progressed, she would have conversations with them. And one of the things that I appreciated where she was at, because some communities and some staff and some people, family members in general, will go, oh, she's crazy. Give her medication, that's inappropriate. And it's like, they really got that she wasn't stressed. She was extremely comfortable. She was calm. They were alone. Yeah. This isn't hurting anybody. And I personally wonder if she really was, kind of crossed the veil and having those conversations, because I've had communication with my mom when she couldn't communicate. She started coming to me in dreams, and even after she passed. And, you can tell me those weren't real, but they were very specific, in the moment, pertinent information every single time. Call me crazy, but none of us really know that for sure, what
And
that is.
it doesn't even matter because to you it's real, that's fine.
Yep. Well, and again, as long as nobody's getting hurt, through this. I think sometimes when there are those conversations and, people are looking out the window just talking or whatever it is, I think for some people it scares them because they're just fearful that that could actually happen or it doesn't go with their beliefs. And it really has nothing to do with the person and their quality of life at all. And that's, I think, where we really fall down. Why don't you tell us the title of the book?
It's raining in Moscow. Oh, can you see that? And I forgot my umbrella. And you'll see it has a very Russian feel to it. I think you can see that's Billy there. That's Gran. And this is the Russian twist in it, which maybe we'll come to a bit later. So it's called It's Raining in Moscow, and I forgot my umbrella, but I can't tell you why it's called that because you have to read it.
So when I was looking at the title, it looks like the A's are upside down.
Yeah, it was just to make it look a bit more Russian.
Okay.
The very clever graphic designer, Graham Smith, who made this for me, he came up with that idea, and I thought, yeah, I really like that. It gives a real Russian feel to it.
Okay. I wasn't sure, or if that was something that you experienced with your mother-in-law in terms of her writing or something.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that.
Now, who was the target for your book?
Well, when I wrote it, it was aimed at middle grade, so 10 to 12 or 9 to 13, really the 10 to 12 age group, because Billy is age 13. So that's who I wrote it for. But since I published it, there've been a lot more adults who've read it, and really the people who have experienced relations or friends with dementia, they've come back and they've said, oh, I just love the way you portray all the people with dementia. So although it was meant to raise awareness for young people, but I think really adults enjoy it as well.
I think a lot of times parents, if it is a book for their kids, they want to read it first anyways, because this is a really personal and important message, that you're giving, and they're going to want to know that aligns. But I also think children's books can teach adults a lot, just in the portrayals of story and how you coped, through these storylines and your interactions. I think give people ideas of different ways to do it instead of that typical right or wrong. No, it didn't happen that way. No, it wasn't on that date and not that time. Harry wasn't there. We're so into always correcting instead of just letting the story be told and listen, or, like your son, just not knowing grandma any other way. So this was like no big deal. And I would love to like dive into a kid's brain, or maybe even just do a panel of them and ask them about different people in their life, some of them with dementia, and how they describe them. Because I think it would be just really soft and loving for every single person. They haven't been taught at a young age, to really discriminate or think things are odd. They're just kind of open.
And I think for him, because grandma was really the only old person he knew apart from the other people who lived with her, he just assumed that all old people are completely deaf and have dementia. So for a long time, he was speaking to anyone who was old. He was really yelling at them and talking to them as if they had dementia. But it didn't really matter, but it was, that's all he knew.
I can see that easily. I tell this story a lot on the show because to me, it still just melts my heart. But I remember the time when my daughter, who was, I don't know, between 3 and 5, I can't remember what age, and she was with her grandma, and I left them alone for a little bit because it was really important for my mom to be able to watch her grandchild. And I set them up, and they colored the whole time. But when I walked in the door, they both held up their pictures, and you couldn't tell who was prouder. I mean, there was just this innocence of connection and pride and It was just so beautiful to
Yeah.
see, and to be able to experience that side of a parent or an in-law or a friend, whoever it might be, to really relish in that innocence that so often is hidden as an adult because we're trying to fit in. We're trying to be what everybody else wants to be. And I think sometimes society as a whole overlooks that authentic piece that comes out, because like you said, the filters are gone and they just say what they say.
Yeah, and I think what can be quite hard is when you see the adult who is regressing almost into childhood, and the child who is progressing as they grow up. And there comes a point where they actually cross over, and the child becomes more advanced than the adult who's getting worse and worse and worse. And that I found that quite hard to
Hmm.
watch and to compare the two, because they were so similar in a lot of ways. And that is quite hard, isn't it? When you see that happening.
Yeah. Do you think, and I can just speak from my own experience with my daughter, but I think my daughter's experience with her grandma made her such a compassionate person.
Definitely.
Totally different from the majority of her friends in terms of how she looks at life and how she treats people. And I mean, it's kind of amazing. And people go, "Oh, she just got that from you," and I'm like, "Oh, well, yeah, that was kind of my personality, but I think it was more than that. I think it was her personal experience with her grandma."
100%. Definitely. And when she did die, and he was so sad that she died, but also he really, really missed going into the home and seeing all the other people. And afterwards, he said, "Can we still keep visiting?" And we weren't allowed to, but he really wanted to. That was part of his life. He loved speaking to them. He loved the fact that they all had time for him, and they all thought he, because old people love, on the whole, they love young children going in, don't they? And I mean, my daughters as well. They had the same, and they were a little bit older, so it wasn't quite the same for them. But they all have such an understanding now of dementia and old people and compassion and empathy.
Something that's not necessarily taught in school or even in families nowadays, and such a critical key piece to life. It's interesting when you said your son still wanted to go back. My daughter felt the same way, even though it was hard, and we had a really good relationship there, so they did let us come back and kind of visit with people because we were just so part of the family up there. And it would be nice if more communities would understand the value of those connections, not only for their residents living there, but for the families themselves in terms of a healing process and in moving on. In the US, everyone's always like, we need volunteers, we need this and that, and yet I don't see that tapped into on a level that it could be in some instances. Here in the US, everyone's worried that they're going to get sued.
Actually, in England, there are a lot of schools who, I don't know if you've heard of the Duke of Edinburgh Award, where children aged from about 16 upwards, they have to volunteer to do something in the community, and a lot of young people do volunteer to go into homes to talk to old people, and it is very much encouraged in our schools over here, which is fantastic. And a lot of people, I've heard, young people, once they finished their volunteering, they just choose to go back, and they carry on seeing the person that they were put with, and it just carries on naturally.
Well, and how beautiful is that? I mean, it should be natural. I mean, we should naturally be able to engage, all people around us. One of the things I wanted to ask you was in terms of, response from people who have read the book, what kinds of things are you hearing?
As I said before, the people who have experience of dementia in whatever form or whoever it's with, they've really, it's taken them back. I think they can relate to at least one of the characters in the home. Children who've come back to me or put reviews up, they've just found it exciting because there's another side to the story as well, which I'll just say a little bit about. The reason Billy is in the home is because his house was burnt by a fire, and only he and Gran were left. So that's why they had to move into the home. And Gran couldn't remember anything about their life, and Billy was only 3, so he couldn't remember anything. So they didn't know what had happened to his parents. And the story is how Billy is trying desperately to find out what's happened to his parents. And the Russian side came after I'd written my first draft. The second, I thought we need a bit more excitement here. So the Russian side is actually telling the story of why the parents disappeared in the first place. And that's a whole other side to the story, which I think is my means of getting children to read a book about dementia, because if a 12-year-old, oh, this is a book about old people in dementia, I don't really want to read this. So my way of overcoming that was to put in Russians and spies and fires and excitement and kidnapping, and that's what I'm hoping has drawn them in. So yes, it's worked on 2 levels, and the adults love the dementia bit and the old people's home and all those stories, and the children, I think they get quite a lot out of that, and I'm hoping they learn a lot about dementia from the book. But there's the excitement element in there as well.
Well, you definitely have to have that balance. One of the things I wanted to ask was, what is the length of the book, and are there illustrations or anything in the book?
No, there are no illustrations. It's 292 pages, so that thick. It's quite a decent length. It's on the long side for middle grade, but it's quite a challenging book. So it's for the thoughtful child who likes a good thick book to get their teeth into. But it ends there are a lot of cliffhangers throughout, because I like putting in cliffhangers, and at the end it's a satisfying ending, but it's not quite finished. So I've nearly finished the sequel, which is also including the old people's home and the characters in there, but it's going to round everything up.
I was going to ask you if there was a sequel, so you answered that question. Yeah. So is that going to be about a similar length to the first book then? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and I can see where that intrigue and stuff pulls people in, and of all ages, and I'm a cliffhanger person too. I like to not know what's going on, try to figure it out and be surprised. And
yeah, there are some twists that that's one of the things I've been really pleased about, because people say, oh, I didn't see that coming, and I really wanted to do that, and nobody's ever guessed the ending yet, so I'm very happy about that.
Oh, wow. Have you ever thought about trying to pitch this as a film?
Well, that would be nice. I think I would have no idea at all how to go about that, but that would be a dream come true, yes.
Well, it just sounds like it would be, there's a lot of films out there that, try to portray family situations and stuff, and this has a little broader reach and more diversity in it, and has an outside kind of theme and plot with it. So that might be kind of an interesting way to raise awareness.
Anyone's watching who's into films or does anything to do with films and likes the sound of it, I'm available.
Because I know you have to do script writing and stuff, but they can hire somebody for that and convert a book. But there seems to be a lot more energy and notice and appreciation for films. I mean, I think my mom's been gone since 2014, and she lived with it for 30 years. There was nothing out there at all, and then there was on Golden Pond came out, that was the one and only, way back. And I mean, there just hasn't been a whole lot of films out there that stand out. But I think it would be, I don't know. I think you should manifest on that one, do a little praying on that one, because, it's going to attract a different audience, and we need so badly for our young people to get involved and understand this, and capture them in the moment, with this. So that would be kind of neat. So as far as is people purchasing the book, how do they go about getting it?
Well, at the moment it's on Amazon and in British bookshops, and you can buy it on Kindle as well. But I have no idea about marketing, and when I decided to self-publish this one, partly because I thought it would be a really good challenge and I would learn a lot, and I did learn a lot, because self-publishing, you have to do the whole thing yourself. But what I hadn't realized was the marketing is going to be really, really difficult, because you have to do all the social media and contacting everybody, bookshops.
Are you familiar with All's Authors?
No.
Okay, you need to hook up with All's Authors. Anybody out there that has written a book regarding Alzheimer's and caregiving, All's Authors is a group you can find on Facebook. They have about 250 different authors, and they have a podcast, they have a blog. Before COVID, they kind of had this little traveling library where they would go around and to conferences and things. But I think that you would find them extremely helpful. And so I would definitely reach out to them. And they have all different kinds of genres, from poetry to people with dementia writing books, to family members, to anthologies. I mean, they have stuff for kids. So I would definitely reach out. It's just ALZ Authors. I would also recommend Dementia Map. And Dementia Map is a global resource directory that we just launched. And we have 3 different, plans that are out there. One is free, because we think everybody who has a service, product, or tool is of value. And then we have 2 that are for fee, but they're economical, and you get banner ads and can submit articles, and you can have events. So if you started a book club or something like that, that could be an event, or all different types of things that can be done within the calendar there, as long as it's dementia related. Those would be 2 places I would position yourself.
Through the social media, I have met some fascinating, incredible people who are caring for a parent, especially 2 young girls. Well, they're in their very early 30s, and both of them have mums who, they're in America actually, who both have frontotemporal early onset, and they put videos of themselves on Instagram, and I'm in awe of them. They're so patient, they're so kind. I mean, this is what you must have been through with your own mum, because she was young as well, wasn't she? And it's just incredible how they, I mean, they still have fantastic personalities. Both the young girls, they're so desperate, and they need help, and they need encouragement, and I think they support each other. But I put one of the stories I put on my blog already, and the other one is going on my blog, because I just think any exposure, got to get it out there, because the more people understand and the more people rally around to help, the better.
Well, in the different ages of people who are caring for somebody with dementia, they, again, you don't want to be too stereotypical, but everybody kind of has their own baggage, and somebody who's 30 is going to have different baggage they're dealing with than someone like myself who's 62. It just varies on what stage you are in life, and and all of those types of things. So, and I think that's another group that's kind of overlooked. We have a lot of children that are, caring for loved ones because their parents are still at work. So after school, they're in charge. And yet I would say for the majority over here in the US, families don't really tell the children what's going on, though all the dynamics have changed in the household. So they don't quite understand, and they want to help. But I think a lot of times they're pushed away, like, well, this is an adult thing. And yet your son was brilliant in terms of his interaction and what he was able to give. And I think sometimes adults get too much of a mindset that this is this is our responsibility, when really it's the family, because that child needs to understand why the dynamics have changed, because if they don't, they start blaming themselves that maybe they did something wrong, that they're not as big of a priority in the family as they used to be.
And as you said yourself, your daughter, my son, they got so much from being with people and understanding that they were different, but the compassion that they learned from that experience, you can't teach somebody that. You have to go through it yourself. And actually, when in my story, Billy doesn't tell anyone at school that he lives in an old people's home because he doesn't want to be judged for it. And he makes friends with a girl called Katie, who's actually one of my daughters, Katie. And he doesn't want her to know. And he says, "Oh, I want to tell her, but I'm worried what she's going to do." And when he eventually tells her, he said, "I live in an old people's home," and she looks at him and she says, "That's so cool." I was so relieved. She thinks it's cool. And then, she comes to the home and everything's fantastic because she loves it and she gets on well with the old people. And that was slightly another thing that I wanted to get across, that it's not something to hide. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's part of life, isn't it?
For sure. And I love that reaction. And with kids, we never know what their reactions are going to be, but it also saddens me that he knew people would judge. And yet he probably wasn't aware that he wasn't doing that where he lived. Yeah. So interesting. Now, you had mentioned your blog. What types of things do you blog about?
Okay, so I did a lot of research into dementia because although I'd met all these people and I had all these great characters, I didn't want to get it wrong. I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was talking about, and looked into it a lot more deeply. So a lot of my blogs are about dementia, and the different types of dementia and how they're brought out in the characters. But also I've done random interesting people. For example, we have a boatman who lives near us, and he's a bit of a legend. And so I gave him a copy of my book to read, and I've got a picture of him holding the book and talking about what he does. So it's quite random, my blog, but it's just what I want to write about. I try to help other authors as well. It's nice to work as a team, so I've put on a few of other authors who self-published. My nephew has just told me he wrote a short story about dementia, so I'm going to try and persuade him to let me put that on because he's 16, so I think that will be really interesting. He doesn't actually know anyone with dementia, so I think to see what his take on it would be very, very interesting.
Well, I know that it can be spooky, to put something like that out there, but I would definitely encourage, kids to do that. And if he ever wants a little more exposure, I've got a pretty large audience, feel free to ask him if he wants to publish it on Alzheimer Speaks. Okay. And then I have it, I push it out on the blog, but then on my website, which I'm in the process of redoing right now, we'll have a section where people can just kind of browse through those things too that have been written as well. Because I just think it's something that gives people comfort. The more we can get people to share, the better off we all are.
Yeah, the other thing I've tried to do, but I'm not making very much headway, is I've put together a PowerPoint for schools which explains a bit about dementia, and it's actually I'm a primary school teacher anyway, so I know how these things work, and I put together a PowerPoint which explains about dementia, and then there's a competition for children to write a story, and it has to have the words "It's raining in Moscow" and "I forgot my umbrella" to fit it into the story somewhere. And I thought, especially during COVID when so much was online, I thought teachers would jump at the chance. But I have very, very few back. But those that I have back, I'm starting to publish the children's stories, and that's quite nice. But I was a bit disappointed. Maybe I'm not approaching the schools very well. I would have thought that they would be open to an explanation about how dementia affects people. But maybe I chose the wrong time, or I don't know. I will persevere with it though, because I really think it's important that young people are aware, because it can strike at any time, and everybody has grandparents. Well, hopefully everybody has grandparents, or knows people who are old, and it's much more common than people think. And if you know a little bit about it and you know it's not scary, that's half the battle, isn't it, for young people?
Yeah, it might have been the timing with COVID, and I know in the States here everything kind of went online, and the teachers were just like, "How do we do this?" They were just trying to figure out the system itself, and they were going through a lot of different variables, and then they went to their hybrids, and so it might have just been timing. What I have found, because I've gone into the schools myself, and not for years, and you might want to try something like this, is I did some interactive pieces in terms of engagement with them. So I had them wear like ski gloves and try to pick up coins, and you can't just pick them up like this. You end up having to slide them off, and using those to write with different size pens. I had some glasses, that and you could use any glasses and just put a little even Vaseline on them, but have them try to read different types of print and point out, the importance of contrast. That kind of goes as we age. So I tried to put in the whole aging piece there. I had them put popcorn in their shoes, because a lot of them are in pain, but they don't talk about it. And so, and they loved doing all those little games and stuff. And then I also did one, which was really, really fun, was I had them describe an old person. So I would just be up the whiteboard and I'd be writing it all down. And it was, I want you to describe an old person, what you think an old person is. What do they look like? What do they wear? What do they smell like? What do they do? And it was hilarious. I mean, it was just hilarious. They bingo and they go gambling, and they all have white cars, and they wear tennis shoes, and they're wrinkly, and it was funny. It was just funny. And the women like to bake, and I mean, they were very, very stereotypical in this whole thing. So then I said, okay, great list. I said, now I want you to pretend you're the old person, and I want you to describe a teenager. And so we went through, and they put all the things that they thought old people hated about them. I mean, it was just amazing. And I said, okay, this is wonderful. I said, now of this list you just made of, old people, thinking of what you are, do you think this is accurate? And they all, no. And I said, so do you really think this is accurate? And they all just kind of sat back, with that. And, and then I would kind of work in dementia there as one of these aging processes, and do it kind of through storytelling. I didn't do a whole lot of statistics with them, but I did ask how many people have noticed changes in older adults in their lives. And just about every single one of them held up their hand. And it was probably close to half of the classes when I've done this have actually had to watch an aunt, an uncle, a grandma, a grandpa, or a parent at different times. And that just astounded me that it was, and yet it's not talked about. And so I just tried to approach it kind of from a different angle, and have them really involved in the process, and think about how we treat one another, and reminding them what it feels like when we don't fit in and when we're treated poorly. They can all relate to that.
The ideas that you just said, I'm going to go and write all those ideas down, because I would like to go into schools when we're allowed to. And the popcorn in the shoes, that's genius. And the way you've done that, I think that's fantastic. That's such a good way to actually experience what it might be like, because it's you can't as a child. I remember a group of us tried to make ourselves look old when we were about 16, and we were trying to think, how would we move if we were old, and we just looked like 16-year-olds dressing up.
Mm-hmm.
And but putting popcorn in your shoes and Vaseline on your glasses and using big pens or small print, that's brilliant. That is really a very small taste of what it might be like.
That contrast in writing. I mean, I had somebody just send me something the other day to review, and they're like, how is this? And I'm like, the content is fine. I said, but it's very fine print. It's white on a light purple. I said, for older eyes, that is going to be really, really difficult. And, we're so used to filling pages instead of really communicating, what are the specifics that are needed. Anything, Caroline, that we haven't covered regarding the book? It sounds fascinating. So I'm very excited for you. And again, I hope you connect with all those authors. And I hope that you list it on Dementia Map too, for more people to be able to find as well.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna look at that.
So as far as contacting you, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you?
Through my blog. So my blog is carolineboxall.com, or I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Yeah, any of those ways.
Okay, wonderful. I really appreciate your time today and sharing your story. It sounds amazing, and we wish you the best of luck. And for those listening, I hope that you like, click, and share this. Most likely you know a family with kids where this could really help. And so again, you can find the book on Amazon or Kindle as well. Everyone have a great week. And again, Caroline, thank you so much for your time and your willingness to share your story. Appreciate it.